So welcome back to lectures on Gaslit by a Madman, on philosophy, madness, and society. My new book on my experiences, my unfortunate experiences with psychiatry. The certifiably true ravings of a section philosopher. So I'm just going through one of the introductory pages of my book, and after the Zizek quote, the next line is that the book includes the author's very own 12 rules for mad miracles, a dozen recovery, based on hard-won experience. And that of course, is inspired by Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, which is a very good book, and I admired Jordan Peterson a lot. I think he's an amazing propagator and spokesperson for the depth psychological riches of the Western tradition over the last 100, 200 years, with Nietzsche, Jung, Dostoevsky, etc. And also making some very apt political interventions, or attempting to. So I can hardly say enough good things about him. But if you look at his 12 rules as well, I think mine are much better, because his 12 rules are rather derisory, really. I mean, if you look at them, they're these petty business about tidy your room, etc. Go upstairs and tidy your room. Not very magnificent for such a thinker as him. I think if you're picking 12 rules, for life, the most essential ones, they would not be his. It's more his offerings are more have more of a droll, trivial kind of attraction, if anything. They're attempt to do something a little bit differently, perhaps. But they're not like the 12 commandments of spirituality or something like that. I don't even agree with all of them. I think he does come off as a bit of a fusty, bad-tempered old, patriarch, in some respects, which I don't particularly like that side of him too much. But on the other hand, I do admire his seriousness and his conscientiousness. But yeah, I mean, mine are obviously a little bit more, out there, and not so frowning as his are. I mean, 12 rules for mad miracles, a dozen recovery. How I recovered from mental sickness and reclaimed my life. As a subtitle. And they're only very short compared to his. Just a few paragraphs each. It's only a fairly small part of my book, but it's the more positive part of my book, so important for that reason. And I think that mine are maybe a bit more essential than his are. I tend to talk more in abstraction than he does. Like his are all quite concrete. Like go upstairs, tidy your room, etc. And I'm not so keen on the concrete. There's a tendency in modernity to to try and stick to the concrete more. In behavioralism, it's all about actual the observable concrete reactions of human beings, or even literature. It's they tell describe it in as you would actually see it, in terms of the outside signs of what is. Don't describe in things in terms of these kind of like, old-fashioned kind of abstract notions like the soul, or these inner emotions, which they're vague, they're considered vague and meaningless or not as vivid, etc., etc. And I'm not particularly convinced by that. By that modern approach, I prefer the abstract in many respects, and I think certain such notions are more indispensable, however vague they might be, and behaviorism, for instance, psychology, it may be more concrete, but it actually distorts the phenomenon, terribly, far more than the vague, harmless, old-fashioned talking about soul and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, so if you do read my 12 Rules for Madman Recovery, which you can read online, freely available, it's kind of like it's a bit like Nick Cave's description of the Bible, which is like some kind of madman shouting instructions at you. Do this, thou shalt do this, thou shalt. Yeah, it's not the typical kind of modern kind of magazine piece about self help, which tends to be like very kind of like, I don't know, just deliberately kind of sympathetic and you know sympathetic to human weakness and not and desire not to be preached to. No, I'm a bit of a preacher. I mean, I do yell instructions a little bit in my guides. But I hope there's also a certain amount of genuine kind of empathy coming through, and understanding, and people won't be too hasty to dismiss it because of the slightly bombastic approach that I take, which it's just how it came out of me, at the time. And I mean, I feel that it's I hate the clinical modern approach to human beings and psychology. The medical clinical approach, which just the language makes one feel ill. The language makes one feel ill. It's nauseating. Applying these disease concepts to human beings makes you want to throw up. So I despise the disenchantment of the modern world, and I would much sooner talk in terms of fairies, the bottom of the garden, and and witches on broomsticks, magic spells, and the kind of myths and fables and that Jordan Peterson rehabilitates and talks about, the deep psychological meaning, of these things. I find that infinitely more healthy. And just breathing the air of those kind of beautiful myths, etc. Is good for one's health, compared to the modern clinical horror. So yeah, I mean, my approach embodies that, even more than Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is coming at it from a scholarly approach, talking about these myths in a scholarly way. Mine is more like, I don't know, talking about scholarly things in a mythic way. um, so yeah, so just I'll move on from that now. To the warning labels part, like as a kind of satire of the warning pills, on the warning labels on on those little pill boxes that you can't live without nowadays. Warning: this book is a vital contribution to understanding the dreadful conditions of the current mental health system. It will no doubt be thought highly offensive to many, especially the perpetrators, taking a highly confrontational approach starting from literally the very first page. It's also highly blasphemous. Yeah, so that's what the book is about, and it doesn't mince words. It can't mince words because this was a work of pure, outpouring of agony from me, of what was inflicted upon me. It wasn't a question of moderating my my voice, because it would either have been said or not said at all. It would either be said, as it was felt, which is a cry of agony against what was done to me, or it would have just been, it would have been destroyed within me like everything else was. Yeah, and it's also highly blasphemous. Yes, because this is a work of a demonstration of high religious psychosis. It's it is a treatise on madness, but also a mad treatise, and it it plays with the idea of madness, throughout, as part of its, aesthetic and stylistic approach and content. And it is highly blasphemous because, unfortunately, we're kind of, reinstituting, heresy laws in society, fairly rapidly. We already basically have had, the heresy laws of psychiatry for the last 100 years anyway. But now, we are we're carving away what remains about freedom of speech, for the sake of the new religious zealots who we've imported. So, I'm putting my neck on the line a bit here, and I can only say, if you are of a sensitive disposition, this is going to be offensive to a lot of Christians as well. This is going to be highly offensive to a lot of Christians, or even though I consider myself pretty much a Christian myself, because I despise limitations on freedom of speech, and I consider it antithetical to true holiness and piety, which I construe as, basically correct understanding, logical understanding, which requires a no hold bars approach. In many instances. I think if I was coming up with my absolute ideal, of how a person should behave, and what my idea of the Superman, the Ubermensch, maybe I would do things a bit differently. I don't know, because I do like kind of like some kind of piety, more kind of reverent kind of piety, and kind of maybe minding what one says a bit. But On the other hand, when a culture is so saturated with lies and nonsense, and which is extremely pernicious and causing grave amounts of suffering, you know, then there is a lot of justification for a highly liberal attitude to speech. And I mean, maybe I haven't done it in the absolute best way and most holy way, but I feel that in the book I've said a lot of truth, and that's the most important thing. So then going on to the next line, while not shying away from strong words and all kinds of wicked, gleeful mockery, it is also and foremost a gift of the utmost love to the whole of humanity. Yeah, so as I've already said in these videos, today we have like this idiotic dichotomy of like love hatred, and it's it's arbitrary application to what people say in political discourse, which is most dishonest and destructive of true dialogue and understanding. So my approach is the opposite, and it's to say that yeah, there is a lot of wicked, gleeful mockery, because in order to right injustices, you have to attack injustices, and also it's there's no marks for doing something in a kind of a supposedly impartial and objective, passionless light. No, I mean I try to create a sense of joy in what I'm doing, and including the gleeful mockery of the rampant garbage, ideological garbage, and idiocy, all around us. And that hopefully makes it can make it more enjoyable to read, and it's not so so darn hypocritical to stick to this dry scholarly mind-numbing tedium that we see all around us, for the desire not to cause offense and not to be seen as hateful, and and to be respectable, etc., etc. No, I mean, as Nietzsche said, a delight in malice is is one of the highest virtues. Yeah, but it's also at the same time a gift of the utmost love to the whole of humanity. Because when I attack people, it's not because I wish them ill, so to speak. I mean, I don't I don't separate into us and them, at least not categorically. There's always a hope of reconciliation, and I criticize people because I want to turn them around and get them actually doing good, and recommitted to the right. I want them to repent, so then they can be a good tool of God in the future. I a true moral spokesperson, like the old prophets. He doesn't speak in terms of us and them. He considers the whole of the citizenry, or the whole of humanity, his own people, and he tries to do what is best for all of them. And just because it contains extreme condemnation and criticism, that is, as I've already explained in the previous video, does not mean is not an enormous gift of love. Because true love is about loving, the potential, and it's about righting injustices. It's not about hypocritical flattery. um, and yeah, okay, I'll move on from there. If you cannot tolerate a little salutary poison and malice in your panacea, please look away now. So yeah, so that's a bit of an ironic reference to the slightly poisonous and malicious toxic pills that that are being pushed down everybody's throats nowadays. So yeah, I'm saying, just like their pills are, in fact, highly poisonous and toxic, you have to tolerate a bit of salutary poison and malice in the cure that I'm giving to you. But whereas, I would strongly argue that the pills that that most people take are, in fact, doing overall, they're doing overall harm, and they're simply suppressing the symptoms. On the other hand, my approach is what I do is the exact opposite, and I'm actually trying to address the root causes. But in order to do that, I will have to give a lot of offence, and I will have to attack a lot of pieties, and potentially cause some amount of pain, because it's painful for people to see the truth, to recognize the truth. Um, and side effects may include much horror, legitimate remorse, bitter yet cathartic and healthy lamentation, extreme dizziness, ecstatic trance-like states, life-changing epiphanies, rebellious outrage, vomiting up society's propaganda, increased working vocabulary, uncontrollable weeping or laughter, mild shortness of breath, and frothing angrily, indignantly at the mouth. So yeah, so that's more satire, the the atrocious side effects listed on pills, which don't even cover it, most of the time, because because basically it's very, 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 very difficult for people to prove, the actual consequences of the medication that they take or they're forced to take. You can't prove a correlation, and 90% of the time the doctors will just write it off because it's not in their business interests to promote the idea that these pills have side effects, have serious side effects, as they do. And then the very idea, the very notion, the very words side effects, it's important to point out that is, that's kind of a euphemism, because most of the time these are kind of like the core effects. They're not side effects. They are they're more like the core effects. Like, for instance, psychiatric medication, they talk about, all these things are side effects, but in my case, all I had was the side effects. I didn't have any positive effects. that they, it's important to emphasize that when the body is reacting in all these pathological ways to the poison that you're swallowing, well, that does indicate that it's poison. It's they're not just notable as effects themselves, but they're noticed. The so-called side effects are in fact most notable or most important as symptoms of the poisoning that the drugs are doing to you. So they're not to be considered in themselves primarily, but as a sign that you're being poisoned. And then I've got 3 hashtags, my banners that I march under. And there's @poetry, not pills, because the true way to psychological healing is through actually being cherished in one's own mind and one's own spirit, and learning to express oneself more and understand one's own condition and experiencing true communion with others, which poetry is an ideal means for, and it's what I do in this book. And it's what helped me to heal. And then meditation, not sedation. Yeah. Because sedation is, again, it's the opposite of health. It's really creating a state whereby you can't reach, you can't heal. It's in order to heal, you need your full faculties. You need your full presence of mind, and you need to work through your issues. Sedation, it does the opposite. It prevents that from occurring. Just in order to keep you quiet, to keep those around you, satisfied. Whereas meditation is a true serenity. It's a true calm, which sedation is the mockery of. It's the mock calm, the mock serenity. The meditation is the true means too. And diet, not drugs. There's so much healing can occur through adopting healthier diets. Because diet is as Hippocrates said, the true medicine is food and diet. A doctor who does not pay attention to your diet and your nutrition, first of all, well, like they do today, they don't even know anything about it. I mean, they go through, I don't know, 5, 6 years of medical school. They don't know anything about nutrition. And they will mock you for talking about it, and in my case, they will section you for paying attention to it. So I mean, now in my book I've got some colorful imagery, some kind of memes or advertisements, with my visual art, etc. But I'll just move on from those because it's just repeating sort of the same thing. And then on to the next page. Gaslit by a Madman by Max James Louis. The madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his glances. Where has God gone? He cried. I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. F.W. Nietzsche, The Gay Science. Yeah, so this is the beginning of the grandiosity and the grandiose delusions, psychotic delusions, coming through again. And Nietzsche is, basically my main educator. He was the person who first, corrupted me. And so the whole book is a homage to him, an engagement with him to some extent, although not at a not already as a total foundational level. It's more of a homage than a exact critique, although it does engage with him in some critical fashion. And this is a great quote for me. So obviously there's reference to a madman. And in this parable, the parable of the madman, he is actually, what he's actually doing is actually kind of gaslighting. He was actually gaslighting the crowd when he was saying this, because what Nietzsche's idea was that that people had not recognized, it hadn't really sunk in, the death of the Christian God, the fact that the Christian God was no longer believable, to intellectually respectable people. So, what Nietzsche is doing here, and what the madman is doing, is in a very dramatic fashion, he is, in a way, questioning the sanity of his audience, of the crowd. He's saying that, that they haven't really come to terms and realized the consequences of their own logic, and they are, in a sense, detached from reality, because the true rudderlessness of their situation, being without God, has not sunk in, and they're only just coasting along based upon a collective trance sort of thing. That is exactly what how Nietzsche intends this parable. So it is literally gaslighting. And as I say later in the book, he's actually holding a lamp. He's actually holding a gaslight. He's described as the madman is described as holding a lamp in the parable, which is very very nice and neat, and ties in with my book in a wonderful way. And as I already see, our true cultural malaise as basically existing in the shadow of Nietzsche, and all the mental health issues that people have today, they're nothing to do with chemical imbalances of the brain. What they are is, product of nihilism. They're product of the death of God, and they're unresolved philosophical issues. Much more akin to what Nietzsche is talking about here. And Jordan Peterson, explains a lot of that and goes into it, very nicely. And here we have like an archetypal situation also of like a madman who is actually the vehicle, the messenger of truth, to society, which is how I see myself and how I see madness generally, in many respects, what it can be and what it should be. and its relation to society. Basically, he's considered mad because he's drawing attention to something, to a truth which the rest of society is not ready for, which is trying hard to suppress. and this quote has even deeper meaning for me, because what I see happening in my situation is that this is exactly what happened. The psychiatrists, they already murdered a really big part of my own being, my inner God. And it's so important that this is not dismissed as some kind of sort of grandiose fantasy, but but really the inner spirit of both myself and everybody else is holding the reverence that it deserves. I make no apologies and do not blush from saying, I had an inner God, and that you have murdered him. You have murdered my inner God. I don't blush from saying such things. Rather, I ask you to blush, that I ask society to blush. You do not revere. You do not have proper self-reverence. You don't have reverence for yourself, and you don't have reverence for others. And and I'm telling you, in my case, a great personal tragedy and catastrophe has occurred, which is ironically, a mirror image of what Nietzsche is describing in this quote. Although obviously he wasn't exactly referring to me or to the kind of inner God that I'm talking about, but the Christian God. And yeah, we have killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. So although I feel that I was the one who was wronged against in my situation, 100%. I did nothing, actually wrong, or did nothing, to cause the destruction myself, other than putting myself in the vulnerable position of falling into the clutches of psychiatry. And insofar as I did that, I feel some kind of shared responsibility. It's said that true maturity, amongst the sages, they say that true maturity consists in accepting responsibility for everything that happens in one's life. And I don't know, somehow that idea does run quite deep, in my own subconscious, and I feel a certain responsibility. I blame. It's difficult not to blame oneself for letting this disaster occur. When to prevent it from occurring, one would have had to just be more aware and be more cautious, and not fall into the stupid clutches. But from a from a kind of moral and legal standpoint, I accept no responsibility. It's more from a metaphysical standpoint that I hold myself to the highest standards, and you can see how theoretically I could have I could have done things different to avoid this total disaster from occurring. But that's kind of neither here nor there from a social point of view. And I've got a couple of photos, in here, which you have to see yourself. I won't comment on that for fear of doing myself another damage. If you're reading this now, it means this book has already fallen into your raven-like clutches, and that the universe is calling out to you in some way. Think of it as a kind of reward for all your good work so far. You have been selected. So that's my advertising pitch. I want my readers to feel special, obviously. And who knows? Maybe there's some truth to it. I think we do tend to attract externally, things which are meant for us in some way. First published on the 18th of June 2019, the author's 36th birthday. So that was earlier this year. And 36, that's 6 times 6. And 18 is 3 times 6 as well. Hail Satan. And then I've got in very small print, I've got build your houses on the slopes of Vesuvius, which is a quote from Nietzsche, meaning, live dangerously. So the number 6, as I understand it, represents chance, and to some extent, as well as being a kind of, satanic kind of number. It also represents chance and so I'm kind of, I'm throwing down the gauntlet there, in a way, I'm not actually, a committed Satanist at all by any means. Although Anton LaVey, he was also a Louis, LaVey and Louis, are very, they're cognate last names and terms, both stemming from the tribe of the Levites, which is a Jewish tribe, Jewish name, priestly tribe. But like I say, I'm kind of, I actually quite like Christianity. And obviously, I'm just a general heretic, and religious free thinker. I don't belong to an established religion, but the divine occupies a important place in my thinking. And then hail Thoth, god of writing, and Thoth was Egyptian god of writing, and he was a bird god, and he was said to have created himself out of his own language. Also, possibly a son of Ra, the head, the sun god, the head of the Egyptian pantheon. And I do feel like a bit of a bird spirit, in many ways. Particularly now, I feel that I've been kind of reduced to quite a thin state where I'm nowhere near as powerful as I was. But I'm quite light and airy, and I'm a free spirit. Nietzsche talked of bird spirit, being a bird spirit, and it means that it's pretty clear what it means. It's very worthwhile to understand that the religions, all of the religions have a strong correlation to one another and similarity and unity. If you look at the Egyptian religion and the pantheon, it contains most all of the archetypes which subsequent religions like Christianity repeated and mimicked and were inspired by. For instance, I just said Thoth is said to have created himself from language. Well, that is an idea in Christianity whereby Jesus is said to be able to create things through the power of speech. And God, I think in the Old Testament, is said to create things through the power of speech. So that is a very time-honored religious idea. And then, Jesus, he is the same kind of archetype, or a very similar archetype to the Egyptian god Osiris. A beneficent and kind of self-sacrificing kind of leader and king. And Ra was the sun god, and then Jesus is also heavily associated with the sun. And as Jordan Peterson, he tries to explain, these kind of archetypes, mythical archetypes, divine archetypes, are very applicable to, everyone, and the world today, and the personalities of people today that they may manifest. And it's still, I think, worth studying these old traditions for very, very good insight about various roles within society, and certain character manifestations. So just the last 2 or 3 minutes of the video now. That I just mentioned that you see my beard is gone for this video. Well, that's because I'm still subject to certain psychiatric assessment, and they don't take too kindly to beards. The first time I was sectioned, the doctor said to me, anybody could tell you're schizophrenic from the way you look, from that beard. So I wrote a poem about that guy, about that doctor, memorializing that experience. By calling it the poem's called Hair Doctor Talabani. A pun on the word hair, obviously. And yes, his name was Talabani, which is slightly menacing. Was menacing at the time, seeing as 9/11 just occurred. But yeah, because like I say, that criteria is so absolutely superficial, so narcissistic. All they care about is the most extreme, trivial tick list of outer appearances, and they reduce you to those complete outer appearances, destroying your inner kernel, your inner soul, your inner spirit. the inner person, is gone after a few years in psychiatry. Yeah. So that was lecture 9 of Gaslit by a Madman on philosophy, madness, and society. And I think everybody could benefit enormously from the insights in my book, but I think I don't know. They may be a bit too lofty for most people nowadays, and I wouldn't entirely recommend that you go out and read it. Unless you are a deserving and noble nature, of course. But thank you for listening. I really appreciate you helping my voice to be heard at last.